What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Muse podcast. I have a very special guest today. If you live in the Pittsburgh area, you are definitely familiar with my guest, and that is Ray Fittipaldo, beat reporter for the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. Has been covering the Steelers for over 20 years. So it's definitely an honor to have him on the show. Ray, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, I appreciate you taking the time. So, the big story right now is we just finished up the NFL draft. What were some of your feelings about the NFL draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I thought they addressed really two of their biggest needs. And it was interesting how it played out for them. They go and get their running back in the first round. We all knew that they needed to address that, and they probably had to do it early just because the depth of this class wasn't. It was good, but if you wanted to get that feature back, that 3-down guy, you had to do it late first, early second round, and that's really the way it played out. And the way Kevin Colbert explained it on Saturday night after the draft, the only really small surprise was Freiermuth before offensive lineman for me. But when Kevin explained it, they get second best tight end in this class, and then they take advantage of that really deep center class in their minds and that really deep offensive tackle class, which I think, it was a consensus. You can get potentially starters at tackle into the third. And, obviously the Steelers feel like the fourth round. So when you break it down that way, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Steelers. And, the defense, we'll see if any of those guys pan out. I think Buddy Johnson, special teams right away. Quincy Roche, special teams right away. Maybe they'll have roles down the road, but those first four picks for the Steelers, ideally for them, I think two will be starters in 2021. And I think the two other guys potentially, could be starters down the road as well.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you. The Freiermuth pick was a little surprising. I almost kind of see him as maybe a slightly upgraded Vance McDonald, which we know Ben loved of Vance McDonald. He's a physical guy. I know Steeler fans, and I'm sure you know too, that aren't necessarily the biggest Eric Ebron fans. So, and Ebron's not going to be around forever. So I think that was kind of like, maybe not an absolute need right now, but it's going to be in the very near future. Kendrick Green, I thought was a really good pick. I was a little worried in the second round when we passed up on Creed Humphreys. I thought that he was clearly one of the top 5 best interior linemen. But I thought Kendrick Green, the more I read about him, the more tape I watched, I'm definitely a fan of him. Buddy Johnson, I really kind of see almost being a future Vince Williams, just one of those big physical guys that just plugs in that run. So one of the surprising moves for me was when they traded a 4th round pick next year to move up and get Isaiah Loudermilk. That one really kind of caught me off guard. Was that something that you kind of heard whispers of that Pittsburgh liked him, or was that kind of surprising for you too?
No, very surprising, especially because Kevin Colbert last Monday said that this was a very weak defensive line class. So I mean, you trade next year's 4th round pick to go up and get him, but they explained it. They're going to get a 3rd round comp pick for Bud Dupree next year, and it looks like they're probably going to get a 5th round pick for Matt Filer. So you have 2 extra picks next year. So trading away your own 4th round pick isn't going to hurt all that much. And then the other thing that they mentioned was their familiarity with Wisconsin's defense, and they know how well that other Wisconsin players have transitioned within their defense, and specifically TJ Watt. So they kind of know the system. They know Paul Crisp. They know the type of guy he is. So obviously someone in that building really, really liked him to trade away a 4th round pick for him. He was a guy, honestly, if you read about him, he had a late round grade, 6th, 7th round. So, for them to give away a 4th round pick, that's definitely someone people are going to be watching here in the next couple of years to see if he develops.
Absolutely. And was there anybody in particular that you felt like, Pittsburgh passed on that you were kind of expecting, or, from buzz or from what you were kind of, hearing through the grapevines that you thought Pittsburgh might try to nab but maybe passed on?
Oh, you mentioned Creed Humphrey. Both Creed Humphrey and Josh Myers were there for the Steelers at 55. And, we just explained why they decided, not to make those moves. So I really thought going into the draft that they would get their center in the 2nd round. Like in the 4th round range, they passed on Sean Wade. defensive back from Ohio State. I thought they might go D-back earlier. They wait till the 7th round. They get Trey Norwood out of Oklahoma. We'll see how that pans out. But, they must like James Pierre and or Dustin Lane. That's the only thing that I can gather about their draft strategy this year in terms of the defensive back. So, I thought they might go after Sean Wade or, I think Ambry Thomas was off the board by the 4th round. I think he went late 3rd round. So that was another guy that I kind of liked, who I thought might be a good, fit for the Steelers. But like I said, they must think James Pierre can handle that role, or maybe Dustin Lane can bounce back from his late season struggles, because obviously it wasn't a huge concern of theirs in the draft.
Yeah, and we keep hearing more and more, kind of whispers about how much they like Cam Sutton, but with the loss of Mike Hilton, I feel like Cam Sutton's going to have to play that nickel back because that's such a pivotal role in today's NFL with sub packages. So I think it is going to be have one of those guys to step up on the outside to replace Steven Nelson. When we look at the roster, and now, of course, it's going to change up a little bit as your June 1st cuts and whatnot. And I'm sure it's going to continue to be kind of a weird and wild offseason. But as the roster sits today, what do you think the Steelers' biggest weakness is?
I don't want to call it a weakness, but we just talked about cornerback. I mean, that's a question mark, right? I mean, you're going into the season with right now, James Pierre would be atop that depth chart based on the way last season ended. And what's he have? Maybe 25, 50 defensive snaps, sure. Maybe.
Yeah.
He played in the regular season finale against the Browns, and then he played in that playoff game. So we'll see what he's all about. Outside linebacker, Cassius Marsh right now is probably the top reserve. They've played when Anthony Chickillo was kind of their guy. He played 15, 20 snaps a game. Those aren't throwaway snaps. I mean, you need someone to come in and to give TJ Watt a blow, to give Alex Highsmith a blow. Alex Highsmith, we don't know what he's going to be like as a full-time starter. So is Cassius Marsh going to be that guy? Is Quincy Roche going to step up as a rookie and be that guy at 245 pounds? I mean, he's not the biggest guy. He's going to have to pack on some weight, I think, before he can hold up and run defense. So, what I'm thinking is, like you mentioned, June 1 roster cuts, street free agents out there, guys who have experience during training camp. Maybe you make a trade, but I would say cornerback and outside linebacker for me are sort of the two big question marks in terms of depth. I think they're okay with their starters. I'm just saying depth, injuries, sub packages, they're going to need some guys to step up if the guys on their offseason roster right now don't do it.
Yeah, I honestly thought if he fell, because he ended up going before the Steelers pick in the 1st round, I thought Xaven Collins would have been a great pick, just for the simple fact that I think he kind of, we could see him play multiple backer positions. We could see him, play next to Devin Bush in sub packages. We could see him on 1st, 2nd down, or even 3rd down, rush off the edge. So I thought that was maybe going to be the pick, but they must, obviously he went beforehand, and they must be pretty confident with Highsmith. So we'll definitely see how that plays out. I hear a lot of people that were saying, like, the Steelers made a huge mistake by going Najee in the 1st round, should have been offensive line. And we talked about that depth, but, maybe I'm wrong. And maybe, the national media, who's not as close to the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're wrong. But I have a little bit more confidence in the Steelers offensive line than some do. I like Chucks. I think Banner did well before, the knee injury. I thought Dotson was exceptional last year as a rookie. David DeCastro kind of speaks for himself. He's getting up there in age, but he's still a very, very high level starter. To me, the biggest kind of, question is, is a BJ Finney going to start? Is it going to be a Kendrick Green that's going to start at center? But overall, like, how concerned are you with the offensive line?
I just think there's a lot of uncertainty, and it just goes back to playing time. We talked about the lack of experience for guys like James Pierre and Dustin Lane. You're going to run into that same issue along your offensive line. I understand that Zach Banner won that job in camp last year, but he lined up as a starter really for the first time against the Giants, and then he got hurt. So he's going to have one start on his resume. The uncertainty with Okorafor. Yeah, he's got some starts on his resume at right tackle, but he's never played on the left side, or he hasn't done it on a full-time basis. And then I agree with you. I think Dotson, he was probably ready last year, and they just decided to stick with Filer. That's why they weren't really concerned about Filer moving on. And then the big question mark, obviously, is Kendrick Green going to be ready at slightly under 6'2", 305 pounds. I know they like his athleticism. I know they like his demeanor. He gets after it, but is he going to be able to hold up against 340-pound nose guards, guys who are 6'5", 340, and he's giving away 35 pounds and 3 inches. So to me, that's the big question. They feel like he can do it, obviously. But if he can't right away, you're going to have to ride with BJ Finney or JC Hatzenauer, probably Finney, because he's got more experience. So those, it's not that I don't believe in those guys, because I think there's some guys to work with there, but it's just the experience and kind of guys moving to different positions that's a little bit of a concern for me right now.
We saw Deontay Johnson kind of blow up last year a little bit. He had his shortcomings with some drops there for a minute. But, what player do you think's really going to kind of take the leap, take another step forward for this coming season?
Well, I think Dotson has a lot of potential. We saw flashes last year. When you talk about how this team wants to play, Adrian Clem was talking about Kendrick Green's play demeanor, nastiness. Kevin Dotson can do that. They're not going to have to, pressure him into playing a certain way. That's who he is. He was a great run blocker coming out of college. I think he could be that now. I thought Johnson took a big step last year. The drops. You got to fix that. For him to take that next step to maybe becoming a Pro Bowl type of player instead of just a really good player, he's going to have to get that rectified. I think as far as highest ceilings go, Chase Claypool, to me, I know he had the big numbers in the touchdowns last year. Certain games he was terrific, but if he can become more consistent and if they can find a way for him to be a bigger factor in the deep passing game, I think there's much more on that bone, right? I mean, the deep passing game wasn't really a factor for what I'd say 3/4 of the season. I mean, they didn't do it for whatever reason. And I think if they can take advantage of his height, if he can win a lot of battles, 50-50 balls, you could see him going from, I think he was around 800 yards, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
You could see him go up to 1,000, 1,100 yards just based on utilizing him in a deep passing game. So for me, it's Dotson and Claypool. I think those guys are set to take 2 big jumps as second-year players.
Yeah, Claypool honestly kind of surprised me last year. Not for the simple fact that we knew he was a freak of an athlete, right? But I actually thought he was a little bit more refined as a route runner than I thought coming out of Notre Dame. We saw him toward the end of the season actually start to kind of, instead of just using his athleticism for jet sweeps or screens or kind of just quickly getting the ball in his hands, we started seeing him run comebacks and just beating guys in one-on-one, which was definitely a great sign for a young guy who is, again, the reason he went second round is because we didn't know what his route tree was. If you knew that he had a refined route tree, he was going to be a top 15, 20 pick in last year's draft. So the fact that he started, progressing that way that early into his career is definitely really promising. And it's all going to kind of fall down to, what's Ben got left in the tank and can the offensive line hold up to protect, the Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about that, Kendrick Green, kind of known as a run blocker, he struggled a little bit in pass protection in the Big Ten. I mean, Clem thinks he can rectify that situation, but we'll see. And new blindside protector for the first time since 2015. Yeah, I agree with you. The pass protection this year, it's never really been an issue since maybe 2013. Now I think we're gonna see if these guys can pass protect, because there's a lot of new pieces in different places on that line.
And with the Matt Canada hire, I think that's a huge one right there. Is we talk about players stepping up. I think I mean, Pittsburgh fans are pretty ruthless. We know this. So, it's every year we hear, the OC's not calling the correct plays and yada, yada, yada. But we saw that the short passing game worked really well the first, 8 to 10 games of the season. And nobody was complaining. Ben was getting the ball out record times, not getting hit, which was great. And then defenses adjusted to it, and we didn't make an adjustment to the adjustment. So it's going to be really curious how we kind of call the schematics of a game, with a top tier running back, or what should be a top tier running back. How does it change everything with two tight ends? Eric Ebron's on an inline blocker. Do we kind of go a little bit more double tights, or, flex Ebron out a little bit and you kind of get a little bit of a mismatch? Those are all going to be things that I'm kind of curious to see, early into an OC's career.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Matt Canada is going to be judged really by whether this running game improves, because if this running game improves, it's going to open up a whole heck of a lot with the passing game. I mean, what they did with the passing game last year with absolutely no running game, if you go back and look at the stats, I mean, it was okay. I mean, I know late in the season it was a complete what show,
Yeah.
but for them to do what they did early and middle of the season with absolutely no running game. Look, just Najee Harris open up play action a little bit more. It's going to open up your deep game. You're not going to have defensive backs coming down and crashing and just jumping every single short route that you throw now. So first and foremost, Clem and Canada got to get that running game straightened out. They got to get, if you go from 32nd, they're not going to go to top 10, but if you go from 32nd to even 18th or 20th, it's going to give you a shot, right? That's all you need. You just have to be respectable. And if he can do that, I think just by happenstance, they're going to be better in the passing game too. So I think that was a big part of that hire. Canada has schemed it up before with the running game, and we'll see if he can do it again in the NFL.
And just one quick thing before we kind of move on is I think Harris is a much better receiving back than what people realize. Some of the catches we saw him run or make at Alabama, some of the routes we saw him run, I mean, I really think he can be a factor. Maybe not Le'Veon Bell right away, but like it's something that we've missed since Bell. So I think that kind of just brings another element to our offense that is going to help. James Conner was average, as a pass catcher. But I think you just get a little bit, again, it helps with the mismatches and, lets you have a little bit more tools in the toolbox to make a play. Just two quick questions, the kind of fun ones before I get you out of here is, who is your favorite Steeler you've ever covered in 23, 24 years?
Oh my gosh. Oh boy. That's a good one. Cam Hayward is really, really good with us. I mean, he's just a pro's pro. I've really enjoyed covering him. He's kind of synced up. Like I covered the Steelers back, under Cowher, like it was part-time, I would help out here and there. Like my full-time beat career with the Steelers sort of syncs up with Cam. So I would take Cam. He's just a good dude. Gives you time in the locker room. So once we get back into the locker room and we don't have to put up with these Zoom calls, he's a guy who fills it up for the reporter, so to speak.
That's a great one. Yeah, I don't know a single Steelers fan that dislikes Cam Hayward, so that's a great one. And last one is, what is your favorite moment ever covering the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I would say the Cincinnati playoff game in Cincinnati with the whole Burfict thing, and just it was the craziest scene that I ever watched in a football game, and much less being there. And then at that point, I cover back at that time, I covered the opposing locker room. So I had to go in there and try to talk to Burfict. Burfict didn't talk. It was a crazy scene. Pac-Man Jones ended up talking. So it was a wild, wild night. And I look back on that sometimes. And I'm just, boy, I got to cover that game. That was a pretty cool thing in Steelers history.
That is definitely one of the craziest moments in football history, let alone Steeler history. So that is definitely a great moment for you. Ray, we appreciate you taking the time here. I hope to get you back on the show maybe closer to the season and we could talk a little bit more Steelers football. Thank you so much, Ray.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it.